Perfect.
That doesn't seem to be the case anymore, at least if it ever was. And I have to say the re-election of the government that has been in power for the last 10 years and now has a 4-year mandate to continue, and has placed our get a load of this. I am very active on social media. I'm at Canada Awaken on X. So if you're ever on X and you're looking for at Canada Awaken, that's me. And one of the things that you can see on X that really is telling about this government is the fact that right now Canada is 37 in terms of GDP per capita growth index, and we are now below Mexico. Mexico was a developing country not that long ago, we're below them. So that's a big wake-up call for most of us. Another thing that is really a wake-up call is the fact that now we have somehow or other been signed on to the WHO pandemic preparedness. Somehow or other, even though we didn't ask for this, and now we're under this veterinarian, Tedros, who's leading WHO and making all our health decisions for us. A veterinarian. I respect veterinarians, but head of the WHO, not so much. And you know, one of the things we know is that that is going to lead to a digital ID and ultimately digital currency. And that's something that our very fine current PM has signed. He's written about that in his book. It's called Values, published in 2021. And he wrote about that. So we're up for digital currency, digital ID, so that's coming. We also have a government censorship bill that's coming as well. You've probably seen that. We have Guilbeault that's now in charge of that type of thing. Stephen Guilbeault, very nice man. And so he's going to table a bill that's going to censor you. So the only people that you will hear anything from through censorship is from the legacy media, and of course we all trust them a lot. So that's another reason why I am now here. Another thing that woke me up to what is really going on is what went on through the COVID era. As a teacher, I saw tons of government overreach, which you were very aware of. And I refused to allow my freedoms to be taken away, and I fought for the kids that I was working with, and I lost. So anyways, I did write a book. And it's a trilogy, and this is a copy of it. So if you want to get a copy of it, it's on Amazon. It's called Mission Butterfly. It's from the March of Mankind trilogy. And the first one is out, the second one's coming out in September. I'm writing it with a pen named Simone Georges. But it is about what went on through the pandemic, and it's a dystopian story about what's going to happen if all these government controls actually happen. And it's really a frightening thing when you think about it. So this book, I thought I would just share with you if you'd like to get a copy. It is available on Amazon. I wasn't smart enough like Tanner and brought a whole bunch of copies myself. I didn't know that was a possibility. So anyways, I am an introvert. And I'm a keyboard warrior. So I have abandoned my comfort zone, and I have decided I'm going to fight for a common sense of Alberta. So that's why I'm so new. You won't see me, it's because I have woken up and I said, I have to fight. I cannot sit back and let these things happen. And I do not want to see in Alberta, because I've learned to love Alberta. I am originally from Quebec, and yes, I am Francophone originally. And I woke up and I said, I love this province, and I have chosen to remain here because it is a province that reflects my values. It is a province. There are so many Christians and people that love God and love freedom and love what I stand for, like, and so on. So it is so important. So I just want to let you know, an independent Alberta is what the Alberta Prosperity Project is aiming for. It's nonpartisan and a not-for-profit educational society that aims to educate, inspire, and advocate for all Albertans about the benefits of freedom and prosperity through independence. So the movement began in May 2021 in a humble oilfield shop in Nisku, Alberta, We're a group of Albertans tired of the inefficiencies of our provincial leadership and the overreach from Ottawa, decided it was time to act. So the Alberta Prosperity Project was born, and here we are today. So we like to begin our meetings with an opening blessing. So Father David McLeod is here today to share an opening prayer.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Lord, bless us as we discuss the future of this province and the benefit of her citizens. Give us strength, courage, and openness to meet the challenges of these confusing times. May we keep you before us as our light in all our work. And let's continue with our Father, who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Thank you, Father. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Dennis Mundare. Dr. Mundare is a cardiothoracic surgeon and a critical care specialist who started and directed Western Canada's first heart and lung transplantation program. During his 32 years in practice, he also served on the finance committee of successive provincial conservative governments since the Getty era. He is a founding member and chair of the Alberta Prosperity Society. He is a fiscal conservative, student of the Canadian Constitution, and is here to speak to us on the benefits of provincial sovereignty. Please welcome Dr. Dennis Mundare.
Thank you for your introduction. And welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many people here this evening. And I want to thank the volunteers as well, who have worked diligently to get this meeting organized tonight. So thank you. Now, for a little amusement, I want to start off with a tribute to our former PM and the people that supported him. In the immortal words of Mahatma Gandhi, who was a brilliant lawyer. He was an anti-colonial nationalist and probably did more than anybody else to bring about civil rights and freedom throughout the world. But he was responsible for leading the independence movement that led to India's independence from British rule. And so his immortal words are this: if an idiot is in power, then those who put him there are well represented. Now, I say that because in Saskatchewan, Alberta, central and northern BC, there were no idiots that put him into power. And similarly, with our current PM, there were no idiots also in those same regions. But what does it tell you? It tells you that there's a very different value perspective between those regions and the rest of Canada. And it's already been mentioned, but I want to add a little bit of meat to the bones of our current PM's book entitled Values, in which he claims that Western civilization is morally corrupt. It's morally rotten, the exact words that he said, corrupted by capitalism. Corrupted by capitalism, which, in his own words, led to the climate emergency. All right? For which the solution is, again in his own words, to severely restrict individual freedoms, businesses, agriculture, and the financing of those businesses pertaining to the oil and gas industry and transportation, as well as agriculture. And he talks about the result. He says, well, you know, there's going to be a number of industries that are in lands that will be stranded. In other words, business is going belly up. And he talks about other things such as internal combustion engines. You won't be able to buy them, you won't be able to use them or sell them. He talks about everything pertaining to this kind of restriction, meaning the end of gas-fired barbecues, gas-fired stoves. These are the kinds of things that he is thinking about. And as was said, a central bank digital currency, along with censorship, will control every aspect of your life. This is a very dystopian future, and I don't think it's something that most people really realize what may be coming down the pipe. So, what's the solution to all of this? Well, we know that it's impossible to change the Constitution because we have an imbalance in power and there's no real mechanism to open and change the Constitution, which would help fix a lot of these problems, other than Alberta having a successful referendum on Alberta sovereignty. That is really the only leverage that we have to make change that's been necessary for decades. So, well, what does sovereignty actually really mean? In the simplistic terms, it's self-governance without external interference. But to be clear, sovereignty is not a left or a right issue. Sovereignty is a pragmatic issue. It means freedom from persecution. Political persecution, economic persecution, religious persecution, cultural persecution. That's what it really means. And as a result of sovereignty, I can assure you that when you analyze it, every Albertan will substantively benefit. So why are we in this predicament? And I think we need to understand a little bit of history and what actually has happened to us. So I want to take you back to September 1, 1905. That, of course, is when Alberta and Saskatchewan were incorporated into Canada. Thanks to the efforts of a gentleman by the name of Sir Clifford Sifton. He was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But it's what he said in 1904 that was prescient. It's really important to understand this because it explains why we are in the mess that we are in now. So what he said to an audience in Winnipeg in 1904 were these words: "We desire..."
Sorry guys, the internet is not the best reception here.
Canadian patriots in 2004 were the people living in Eastern Canada. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies, that's Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to its prosperity. That is, the prosperity of the East. Nothing about the prosperity of the West. We started off, therefore, in 1905, September 1, as a colony. We continue to be a colony to serve the interests of the East, and we continue to be pillaged and plundered for the wealth that we create, to our own detriment. Now, what can we do about this? Like I said, nothing, because Canadian federalism doesn't permit a resolution to the imbalance in power, meaning that the federal government is here, the provincial governments are here. We can't solve that problem because it requires opening and changing.
Yeah, the reception is not the best in this neck of the
We'll talk
woods,
about that
guys.
later if somebody wants to know the hurdles to change it, and then you realize that it is impossible. So how has this all been manifest then for us? Well, since equalization and the national energy policy and other federal confiscatory policy, we've given up about $800 billion to the federal government, for which we've not received a cent in return. Now, just a comment about the national energy policy real quick. That was the brainchild of Marc Lalonde, the Minister of Finance in the original Trudeau government. And when he was asked to justify the national energy policy, his simple comment was, we could not let Alberta, we have this on video, we could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada. And you bet they have definitely done everything they can to prevent that from happening, and it was going to happen at that particular time. Now, if we look at their policies have been definitely, and you all know this, anti-Alberta energy, anti-agriculture, and anti-resource development. And the Premier herself has pointed out that in the last 10, 12 years, you know, we've given up $500 billion, $500 billion of investment that would have come into this province, that was planned to come into this province, but it didn't. Why? Because of federal regulations and taxation. That's why it didn't come. More recently, the what is it? It's the Frontier Center for Public Policy released a research paper in which they pointed out that we lose $26.5 billion a year in this province because we cannot get our oil and gas to international markets. Now, we get to the point of values, and we touched on it a little bit before, but it's a very different value set, you know. Much of the socialist wing of Canada, if you will, in those other areas that are not Saskatchewan, Alberta, and central and northern BC, don't mind central control of everything that they do. They're okay, they seem to be okay with censorship. They seem to be okay with the planned implementation of a central bank digital currency, etc. They seem to be okay with confiscating your property, such as with firearms, for example. Now, David Lametti, the former Minister of Justice, has said, guess what? Canadians don't have the right to own property. Did you know that you didn't have the right to own property in Canada? It's true, you don't. So, internalize that. The Premier has said, with respect to firearms, what was it I was going to say about the firearms? Oh yeah, so we have some new legislation pending which may help on that particular file. And our General Counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Society has been responsible for drafting it, whether it will go forward or not, but it's based on Alberta having legislative control of firearms purchasing, ownership, and use. And that would be a pretty good solution. Now, we've already touched on health and the issue of health in the pandemic treaty. The Premier has said, well, we're not going to let the World Health Organization dictate health policy to us. That's provincial jurisdiction. But she's forgetting one thing. It's not the World Health Organization that's going to dictate policy. It's the federal government that signed on to the pandemic treaty, and they will force compliance if Alberta doesn't toe the line to federal policy simply by withholding transfer payments. And that's what they've done historically to a number of different provinces that didn't like what the federal government was doing. So you can imagine if several $1 billion of health transfer, and by the way, we give $70 billion roughly every year, we get back 27 in health, education, social, and infrastructure transfers. So several $1 billion would be at risk in terms of health transfer if the provincial government didn't capitulate to federal dictates. So you can be sure that it would be a huge stress on Premier Smith if we were in that kind of a situation, and I suspect she, like every other premier in Canada, would capitulate. It's already been mentioned, but it's worth mentioning again. Of all industrialized countries, Canada has the lowest growth rate of any industrialized country in the world. So let's look at another issue in terms of something more recent. The Premier has stated a number of demands of the federal government. She's mentioned that it's public knowledge. And she says if we're not successful in getting these things addressed to our satisfaction, that's a threat to national unity. Well, it can only mean one thing, right? It can only mean that she is suggesting that Alberta would leave if we don't get what we want. And this is part and parcel of why Bill 1, their first piece of legislation in the UCP government, was the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. So, but what is she actually, her rhetoric is one thing, but what's actually happening? What's happening now is there are 18 or so lawsuits that the provincial government has launched against the federal government with respect to energy development and transportation, with respect to censorship, with respect to agricultural considerations, etc. This is no way, ladies and gentlemen, for a marriage to continue between Alberta and the federal government. It takes years, if not decades, to solve these sorts of problems through the courts. And the Supreme Court, of course, is appointed by the Prime Minister's office, 3 justices from Quebec, 3 from Ontario, 1 from the Maritimes, and 2 from all of Western Canada. So how do you think the majority of these lawsuits are going to be decided? So it's a no-win situation for us, and it takes, like I said, a long time for many of these court challenges to be resolved. How much more damage can the federal government do to us while these things are occurring? I think a lot, and I think you might think the same thing. So what can we actually do about it? Well, fortunately, there is a legal pathway for Alberta to leave Canada, or any province to leave Canada. It's embodied in the narrative of the Clarity Act, which of course requires a clear question with a clear outcome, and demonstration that there's been consultation with other political parties, the Indigenous population, etc. And so the legal pathway is there, and we have always advocated for the legal pathway. And for anybody that wants to touch on the Westminster Statute in 1931, we can go there too, and I'm going to do that anyhow. But at the end of the day, this is the way it works. The Citizens Initiative Act is where we start. In May of 2022, the Citizens Initiative Act was legislated into operation. And what it required, if you want to make constitutional change would include a province leaving Canada, but if you want to make constitutional, in this case Alberta, if you want to make constitutional change, then what it requires is a petition with 600,000 signatures on that petition collected in 90 days. That's impossible. So we developed a workaround at the Alberta Prosperity Project, and that workaround goes like this. Well, let's collect the contact information for 600,000 people so that once we've achieved that objective, we then submit the petition question for a referendum on Alberta sovereignty to Elections Alberta. Elections Alberta certifies the question, and then we send out the canvassers. But now we know where the canvassers need to go because we have the contact information for all of those 600,000 people. Now, some of you will know that there's Bill 54 looming, and it may be proclaimed into law in early June. That would lower the threshold to 177,000 people. Well, did you all know that we are already well north of 200,000 people, I think well north of 230,000 people that have registered their intent to support a petition. So once we've gathered the petition signatures and Elections Alberta validates those signatures, then the petition goes to the provincial government, and it's up to the provincial government to determine the timing of the referendum on Alberta sovereignty. And that will be up to the Premier. And Mitch and I, chatting with her recently at the dinner in Bonnyville, the Premier's dinner in Bonnyville, which Mitch put on and organized, was fantastic. Plus, he did some great questioning of her as well. I thought it was terrific. But she has stated that she needs 6 months to negotiate with Carney. Personally, I don't think she's going to get what she wants, or if she's playing us, she'll accept something rather more trivial that doesn't require constitutional change, which will be maddening for all of us who really want to get out from under federal overregulation, governance, and taxation. But nevertheless, it will be up to her to achieve that. Now, how's my timing? How long have I been yapping? I got another couple of minutes? All right. Okay. So I want to pose a question to you, and then I want to tell you some of the benefits of Alberta sovereignty. But first of all, the question is the same question I posed to Ralph Klein at the annual general meeting of the Progressive Conservative Party in Red Deer in January 2003. Here's the question, and by a show of hands, I want to see your answer. If Alberta was already a sovereign country, and Canada came to Alberta and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and costs of membership. How many people here would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and costs of membership if we were already sovereign? Raise your hands. I see no
Nobody.
hands. All right.
No one would do that.
Now I've really trapped you. Because the corollary is then, just like I said to Ralph, do you not think you have a moral, ethical, and economic responsibility to get us out of this mess with Canada? To fix this dysfunctional relationship? How many think you have a responsibility to help us get to the point of Alberta sovereignty to solve all these problems that we're facing? Does anybody think you don't have a responsibility? All right, so nobody's raised your hand. Good. So we've got how many more volunteers here now? Okay, wonderful to see. So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of Alberta sovereignty. And I would word it this way: that prosperity will be not only preserved and enhanced, but our freedoms and our prosperity will be protected by a new constitution of Alberta that acknowledges the supremacy of God as foundational for civil society and the rule of law. Now, what follows from that is wherein Alberta becomes the most free and prosperous country in the world to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. That's number one. Number two, Alberta will become the least regulated, least governed, and least taxed region in the world.
Thank you. Let's go. Let's go.
Economics are always persuasive. All right. Pensions, old age security, and veteran benefits will not only be secured, but significantly enhanced by 20-30% or more. 4, First Nations, for the first time, will participate as equal founding members in a new Alberta with their treaty rights protected in a new constitution, which also will permit First Nations to share in the wealth generated by the development and transport of our natural resources. In addition, no Albertan will be left behind, because social programs will be not just compassionate, but actually effective. And all of these problems that we're having with homelessness and various other problems, they can be resolved if people have the courage in government to actually make them happen. And we know how we believe that can happen. Workers' rights will be protected. And at the same time, businesses will be allowed to thrive, including the development of our natural resources. Healthcare and education can become and will become the best in the world and the most cost-effective. And healthcare right now is not very timely. Let me just digress a little bit on healthcare to tell you how bad it is, and I've been in the system for a long time. Did you know that in 1995 that the population of Alberta was 3.8 million people? At that time, there were 5,000 employees for Alberta Health. Here we are now, in 2025, the population is 4.8 million. Well, I just saw it's bumped up to 5 million. Do you know how many employees we have at Alberta Health Services? 130,000. All right?
That's crazy.
The system is corrupt. I've seen the corruption, I've written about it, and I've shared that document privately with Premier Klein. In any case, it was too difficult to deal with. Now, the other thing that I would say in terms of benefits to Albertans is that property rights will be definitively and constitutionally protected. And I can assure you that every single citizen in the province of Alberta will benefit enormously in terms of their quality of life and their standard of living. And let me assure you as well that these things are highly possible and probable. And some of you may know that we've had a small delegation go to the U.S. and meet with very senior officials in the U.S. administration. And they do not want Alberta to become the 51st state. Let me make that crystal clear. They understand that there's a process, and that process, if any region that becomes sovereign wants to join the U.S., they've got to have a referendum on becoming a sovereign nation first. Then they have to have a referendum that they want to join the U.S. And then Congress, 2/3 of Congress, the U.S. Congress, both the Senate and the House, will have to vote in favor of that. So that is not on the table. But the U.S. will help us transition from a provincial government to a sovereign country. Ladies and gentlemen, we can pull this off, and whether that this referendum occurs at the end of this year or at some point next year, I'm very confident we can win it. The latest polls show that we're at around 45% right now, and I'm going to make a comment about polling. You know, in many instances, when people are asked a controversial question, they're not going to answer it honestly or answer it at all. And we saw that with the polling in the U.S. election, right? It wasn't predicted that Trump and the Republicans were going to have a massive win, right? So think about that. Why? Why did that happen? Why do people not want to give up an answer to controversial questions? It's simple. It's cancel culture. It still exists. Think about the trucker convoy when people had their accounts frozen for giving $10 to the convoy. So cancel culture is alive and well still. We know that from talking to people in businesses that are concerned, about these kinds of things. But here's a potential proxy for you to think about. In 2021, we had a referendum on ending equalization. 62% voted to end equalization. Right? Could that be a proxy? Could those same people also support sovereignty? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's an interesting question to pose. The same thing has happened with the pension plan. Mitch has done over 100 presentations, and Tanner, both of whom are following me speaking too long already. But prior to Mitch and Tanner going out throughout the province and talking about the pension plan, there was not a plurality of individuals that supported an Alberta pension plan. The latest poll from the UCP government itself is that 55% of Albertans are now in favor of a pension plan. And believe it or not, 65 to 70% of UCP members are in favor of Alberta sovereignty. Ladies and gentlemen, we can win this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Let's go. Hey, Alberta. Yeah, last poll was 45%.
Privilege to have tonight. Our next speaker is Tanner Mundare. He's a young economist from Lloydminster, an entrepreneur and an aspiring author. One of his books being The Kingdom of Cain. He's got them for sale on the back table there. And he's got a second book out. It's called Antichrist. Tanner is the president of Tanner Mundare Inc. and regularly comments on political, economic, and religious issues. Please welcome Tanner.
Oh, well, it's 3-1 for the Oilers. So there's an upset.
Oilers winning.
My mom's an Oilers fan. My greatest failing is that I'm a Leafs fan. And it's been another embarrassing year. I'm not now. I'm in favor of Alberta independence. Don't mistake me for being one of the Laurentian. But it's my love for the Leafs is genetic, and so it's inherited. I had no choice in the matter. It comes from Dad, and it comes from Grandpa, and for however many years I've suffered, and I'll suffer for so many more. Anyway, what a pleasure to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much for having me come and talk to you. It is my pleasure to be here. Before I begin, I just want to quickly tell you a bit more about who I am. As mentioned, my name is Mundare. I'm from Lloydminster, Alberta. I was recently married with my wife, Paige. We're so excited to join you both tonight. And yes, I have my own little company called Mundare Incorporated, in which I take complicated economic topics, because economics, of course, is so dreadfully boring. And we try and present those economic concepts and topics in a way which is palatable and easier to understand. And so, as mentioned, I have been traveling with Mitch and with others over the last year, talking about various economic issues, pension plan, of course, being at the forefront of those issues. And I'm so excited to see what's been happening in the province over these last few weeks. Now, before I begin, I have to say that Mundare here holds a special place in my heart, because my wife, Paige, is from Red Deer, and of course I'm from Lloydminster. And Paige, having no family in Lloydminster, had no real reason to go anywhere east of Edmonton, at least on Highway 16, until she started dating me. And so when I first took her to Mom and Dad's, I first introduced her to my parents, went down to Red Deer to pick her up and all that, and we went to Edmonton for a bit, and then we carried on our way home to Lloyd on 16. And as we were doing so, I told her, I said, Paige, before we, head back, or before we, I have to take you to what is perhaps the most romantic location in all of Alberta. And she said, so darling, where are you taking me? And I said, you close your eyes, we'll find out. And so she was ready for this, expecting this surprise. And I drive for a couple minutes, and I say, all right, dear, it's time to open your eyes. And she does, and she goes, and you've taken me to the sausage. And I said, I have. And I knew there and then I wanted to marry that girl, because she didn't run away from me. And so it's a pleasure to be back. So today, I want to talk to you about a topic, actually, that I haven't talked about in some time. Recently, a few weeks ago, I was reading a document. I was reading a little infographic online. And this infographic was titled, Alberta Separation for Dummies. Now, after reading the content of the infographic, I decided it should have been called Alberta Separation is for Dummies, because that is what the content of that infographic seems to imply. And as I was reading it, I was looking and studying all of these supposed difficulties, these impossibilities that make Alberta independence a totally unfeasible pursuit for us to engage in. One of the contentions on this document, and this is a contention that we hear from political pundits and bureaucrats and commentators and so on all the time. One of the contentions was, of course, the issue of landlocking. The argument goes as follows, or it says something like this. Alberta independence is an impossible Alberta, because an Alberta that's independent would be an Alberta that's totally landlocked. It would be an Alberta that has no access to tide waters, whether it be on the north side or the south side or the east or west side of that province.
The situation
and
right
so
now.
any idea, any notion of pursuing Alberta independence is pure folly. It's nonsense, because we would be landlocked. So I read that and I went, okay, let's study it. Of course, this is a serious concern. This is a serious contention. Here we are in this province. We are, as you know, an economic engine. We have a titanic capacity for economic output. Just last year, our GDP was in the hundreds of billions, $350-some billion. Unbelievable economic output. And if we saw an independent Alberta watch that GDP plummet and watch that economic output drastically decrease because of problems that come from landlocking, then it might well be that Alberta independence is not worth pursuing. if we forfeit that advantage which has been given to us as a consequence of our industry, our resource, our quality of character, and so on, because we are landlocked, then perhaps we should pursue other options. So let's meet the question head on. Let's ask the question, would an independent Alberta be landlocked? That's the question. Would an independent Alberta be landlocked? And it may sound surprising coming from me, but the answer is short. Yes, an independent Alberta would be landlocked.
It is right now.
Absolutely. Anyone can look at a map and look at the geography of our
Yeah,
province and
it's
see
landlocked right
that
now.
there is no tidewater access on the north side, on the south side, on the east side, or the west side of our province. But my fear, and your fear, is that these pundits and commentators too often, unfortunately, omit that while an independent Alberta would be geographically landlocked, a dependent Alberta, an Alberta that's in Canada right now, is also geographically landlocked.
Politically
We've been
too.
landlocked since our inception. It's
Politically,
true that Alberta
too.
without Canada is landlocked there, and Alberta within Canada is
Still landlocked.
Look at what the map says. Look at how there is no tidewater access immediately on any side of our border. So what I mean to say is to launch an anti-independence argument with we can't be independent because we would be landlocked if we were independent is a non sequitur. It's a non-starter. The actual argument there doesn't really apply. It doesn't apply at all because we're already landlocked right now. So the question isn't would an independent Alberta be landlocked? The question actually is, would an independent Alberta navigate the challenges of landlocking better than an Alberta with...
Yeah.
That's the question.
Easily. A lot more power independent.
You don't even need me up here to be entirely honest, but at any rate. So the question is, would an independent Alberta navigate the challenges of landlocking?
Sorry about the quality, guys. The internet is a little bit slow out here.
Could do so. Now, of course, there are opponents and there are adversaries and there are other individuals who stand up and say, well, wait a second, there is no landlocking to navigate for that matter. What are you so upset about? Everything that we need, we get. Everything that's required right now, we have. And if we want to send our produce and our energy and our goods across the different markets, we can do so. That's their argument. And you say, no, that can't be true. Oh, it is. Look, for example, at Trans Mountain. You know, people across the country, and within Alberta for that matter, say, here we are as Albertans always complaining about a lack of pipeline access. We're always complaining about a lack of pipeline access east or west or north or south, even though the government just so generously built us Trans Mountain. Why should we as Albertans be complaining about this lack of pipeline access when the federal government so generously gave us this pipeline expansion in the form of Trans Mountain? Now, to understand why that's wrong, you have to understand how Trans Mountain works. So Trans Mountain was built in '53. It was meant to take about 150,000 barrels of heavy crude from Edmonton to Burnaby every day. And over the years, it increased in size until about 2005, when Kinder Morgan bought it. In 2012, Kinder Morgan says, we want to triple this pipeline's capacity. We want it to ship about 890,000 barrels of oil every single day. Back and forth. We're going to twin the pipeline. And after a lot of debate and deliberation, years and years and years of it, finally, believe it or not, the Trudeau government said, all right, fine. You have your pipeline, we'll approve it. Well, Trudeau said that not freely, but with the understanding that there would be strict regulations, there would be strict consultation, there would be economic reviews and environmental reviews, and so on, to the point at which Kinder Morgan said, you know what? We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to twin the pipeline. We're going to halt the project. And the federal government said, no, here, let us buy it from you. We know you're going to halt the project, fine, we'll buy the pipeline. $4.5 billion. So the federal government, i.e. you, bought that pipeline. And after more and more years, right, of a lot of the regulation and so on, finally that pipeline was built in 2024 and is now shipping oil. So it would seem that we have no need to try and discuss this landlocking issue at all in Canada because the government just builds pipelines for us. That's the idea. But of course, there are problems with that argument. For example, When Kinder Morgan was going to twin that pipeline, it put out a budget of about $7.4 billion. Cost a lot of money to build the pipeline. By the time government was done, by the time the federal government finished construction on that pipeline, it cost us, because we're paying for it, $30 billion. A 400% increase. $1,700 per Albertan to start at $7.4 billion. By the end of it all, it was $7,000 per Albertan to build that pipeline. More than that, we can't expect government to build pipelines for us. Look at what Mr. Guilbeault just said. Mr. Guilbeault just said it 2 days ago, no more pipelines, because Trans Mountain isn't even at full capacity yet. Trans Mountain is only at 40%. And once Trans Mountain is operating at 80 or 90 or 100%, then Alberta will be so stretched that there will be no more need for new pipelines. But of course that was a manifest lie. Trans Mountain is not at 40%. Trans Mountain is at more like 85%, soon to be 90% and soon to be 95%, and so on and so on. So yes, we have a problem. Most of our oil goes south, it's true. 3.5 million barrels a day goes to America. A few 100,000 barrels a day stays in Western Canada. Fine, excellent, wonderful. But I want to see our economic output increase. I want to see our GDP increase. I want to see Alberta oil all over the world because it's ethical, it's better than that stuff that comes from the Middle East, which is not ethical, and we can increase the quality of life for ourselves, our families, and those who consume the oil all across the world. So how are we going to get our pipelines, or just goods in general, to coast, to Tidewater, where we need to get it? Well, maybe we can wait for a government to do it. That is, maybe we can wait for a government, not who wants to build a pipeline, but who will allow pipelines and other new methods of transportation for all goods to be built. Right? Take the Conservatives, for an example. The Conservatives, the federal Conservatives said they were eager to pass all of these new energy projects and so on. Excellent, wonderful, but there's a problem, which is, if we wait for the federal Conservatives to be elected, unfortunately, we're going to be waiting a very long time. And even if the federal Conservatives are elected, the structure of Confederation, as Dr. Motry has told you, is structured in such a way that the Conservatives will not stay elected for very long. And if they want to stay elected for a long time, they have to not appease our interests, they have to appease the interests of Ottawa, of Quebec, of Ontario, and of the Eastern Bloc, where the concentration of votes in the country lies. And you and I both know that those interests down east are not the same as our interests out here in the west. So if we can't rely on government, and if we can't wait for a new government to solve these problems, what we have to do is Alberta.
Separate.
We have to negotiate. We have to flex some economic muscle if we're going to see these problems, at least possibly, evolve into something better. We have to flex that which we have in the province. Klein had that very famous quote, to let him freeze in the dark, and so on. Maybe we should use some of those tactics and tools. But now you have to approach things legally. We want to negotiate. We know we have to negotiate. But by what measures, what means are we going to negotiate? That's the question. We hear all the time, we should just turn off the taps to the east. We supply Canada, it's true, with a lot of oil, a lot of gasoline, a lot of diesel. You look at Refinery Row there in Edmonton, hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil are refined there every single day. I'm from Lloydminster. We have tens of thousands of barrels that are refined at the Cenovus refinery and the upgrader. We are here a heavy hammer, a hard producer that provides a lot of the energy that Canada consumes. So if we just turned off the taps, it said, then Canada would quickly come crawling to us and recognize that they have to play by our rules or else. But you have to look at the legality of that statement. You see, if we say we're going to turn off the taps, you have to ask, how exactly are you going to do so? Well, we could answer, we're going to invoke Alberta's Bill 12. It was passed just before 2020. It was passed in 2018, 2019. And in essence, it gives the Alberta government the power to either permit or revoke or force companies to apply for licenses if they want to ship energy out of province. So take Enbridge. Enbridge runs a pipeline. Let's suppose Enbridge wants to ship some oil from Hardisty all the way to, Regina. Under Bill 12, The Alberta government could say, you have to apply for a license to do so. And if the Alberta government rejects that license, then you can't ship the oil. Sorry, you don't have the legal authority to do so. So we could invoke the bill. But wait a second, says the courts. Not so fast. BC challenged this law, and it was ruled in BC's favor that a province, Alberta in this instance, cannot invoke a bill, Bill 12, if it's meant to punish another province. So Alberta cannot invoke Bill 12 if it's meant to incur some economic hardship on its trading partners to try and, guarantee or justify or produce a better deal for Alberta. And so the bill is all but useless. It's all but inert. To be entirely honest, it's never been used. Not seriously. Well, we say, okay, I guess we can't use Bill 12, but surely the pipelines, the big pipelines, Keystone XL, or Keystone, not XL, that one didn't get built, but Keystone, and Enbridge, Line 3 and Line 5, and all of these big pipelines coming out of Alberta are under Alberta jurisdiction, are they not? And the answer is they are not. When you have interprovincial pipelines that move across provincial borders or move across countries' borders, it is not provincial authority pipelines. It is the federal government's authority. That is their domain. So if we were to say we're shutting down Keystone or we're shutting down Enbridge, the federal government would say, no, you're not. That is not your decision to make. It's ours. We have to consent to it. You don't get to do whatever you want. And so we say, fine. These two options have been taken away from us. Let us exercise the third option. Let us exercise the option of perhaps blocking trade from neighboring provinces or putting tariffs on goods that flow through Alberta so as to induce some economic hardship for others until they respect our demands and give to us what we know that we need. Once again, we have to look at the Constitution. Section 121 of the Constitution is very clear. A province cannot restrict the free trade between itself and another province or other provinces. So Alberta does not have the constitutional authority right now to say to BC, we're going to put a tariff on every good you send to Manitoba. And Manitoba does not have the constitutional authority to say, we're going to put a tariff on every Alberta good that's sent to Ottawa. Doesn't work like that. The Constitution is clear on this matter. The picture that I'm painting for you is that if Alberta wants to negotiate, especially with those who do not share our particular views on the matters of economics and energy, we need leverage. And within Canada, we do not have leverage. You know this, and so do I. Right, what is leverage? It's best expressed, probably, right, as the capacity for a small thing, a small advantage, a small position, or a smaller position to multiply and turn into a big advantage. Turn into a big blessing. That's what leverage is. So your children, your two sons are fighting, and it's not as though the one son says to his brother, give me the toy. He says, give me the toy or else I will call mom. He says, give me the toy or else. He invokes some leverage. It's not as though my wife says, go clean the garage. She says, go clean the garage, or I'm hitting you with this cast iron skillet. She doesn't actually. She's lovely. She's here tonight. But anyway, that's leverage. So too with Alberta. What are we going to say to Ottawa? We want a pipeline. We want to ship some more goods, or else we're going to cut off trade. Can't do it. What are we going to say to them? Give us the goods that we need, or let us ship them to where we want, or else we're going to turn off the taps? Can't do it. And Ottawa knows it. What are we going to say? Give us the goods that we need. Let us ship the goods where we want, or else we're going to not vote for you in the next election. It's too late. What does Ottawa care?
It don't matter.
So we have a problem. We want to negotiate, but we have no leverage. Not within Canada. What about without or outside of Canada? Would we have leverage then?
A lot more.
Well, again, you don't need me up here. First, we would no longer be beholden to Section 121 of the Constitution. I'm not saying we should invoke these policies or these negotiating tactics. That's for a different speech entirely. All I'm saying is these tools are now at our disposal. We would no longer be beholden to Section 121 of the Constitution. So that if we decided to say every good coming from the Vancouver port and coming through Alberta on rail will be subject to a tariff, whatever number that might be, it's not as though the Supreme Court of Canada
Lauren,
can
they're
say,
going
"You
everywhere.
can't do that,
You
it's
really can't take any
unconstitutional,"
population
because
for
we will no
granted.
longer be governed
Gotta go everywhere.
by the Supreme Court of Canada. Or take the pipelines. Let's suppose that, Ottawa's playing tough and is playing a hard negotiator. It's not as though the pipelines, which now originate in Alberta, even though they span across Saskatchewan and Manitoba down into the south, are now sole federal government jurisdiction. No. The section of pipeline in Alberta becomes Alberta's jurisdiction. And so the situation looks very much different. So too with Bill 12. The government could, again, I'm not saying it should or it would, I'm just saying it could, invoke Bill 12 and not grant licenses to companies that want to ship oil so as to really turn off the taps for Canada. I am not here trying to advocate a strategy. What I am here to advocate is an independent Alberta has more leverage available to itself than a dependent Alberta does. And an independent
Easily. Absolutely.
An independent Alberta is better able to negotiate than what it can negotiate with right now. It doesn't have the capacity to do so. Right now, Ottawa treats us like a child. They are the parent. So they come to us and we say, we want this, and they go, no. And what we say goes. And you can't argue otherwise. What are you going to do? Which law shall you invoke? Even if we pass laws that are unconstitutional, like Bill C-69, we still abide by them. It's nuts. But if you were your own province, if you were your own separate Alberta, Ottawa would be forced to approach you, not as a child, but as an equal partner, as someone who is not under you in confederation, but entirely separate, an own nation, not governed by the Constitution of Canada, which gives the federal government these powers that make it impossible for us to negotiate our landlocked position as we would like. That's what independence does. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you I know what the future is going to hold. I have no idea. The fact that the future is uncertain is what makes it the future. There are other commentators who say, well, even with these advantages, we certainly shouldn't pursue independence, right? Because it would be so difficult. It would be so very hard. But my conviction is that living under this government and these governments continually will be even harder. It might be difficult, but it would be more difficult to stay in the present position
You're witnessing history,
that we
people.
are in.
This
Here
is
we are,
history.
a land. Here we are, Alberta. We are a land that is rich with rugged resource. We have been given this God-given blessing itself that we are able to use for not only our family's benefit, but also for others' benefit. And it has not been appointed to us to watch all of this resource and all of this industry and all of this energy languish under this heavy, heavy hand of Ottawa. We know the scriptures, to whom much is given, much is required. We are in a province where much, much has been given. And it is my conviction that we are obligated to see that the benefits accrue to not only ourselves and our children, but also to those across the country, across the countries, the continents, and the entire world. Here we are, pipelines are stalled, projects are strangled in their infancy, and we don't face blockades from mountains, we face blockades from bureaucracy. That is the way the country works right now. So you see, there are moments in history when diplomacy needs to be delicate. This is not one of those moments, in my opinion. There are other moments in history when diplomacy has to be not elegant, but effective. And that is the moment right now. For too long, here we are in Alberta, we've been forced to wield a feather while Ottawa has swung its sledgehammer again and again and again and again. And I'm concerned, or as far as I'm concerned, that time is over. It's time we pick up tools of our own. It's time we negotiate for ourselves, for our children. And it's time that we secure a future for our families, our children, and our posterity, and our people. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, folks, I just have to make a comment because everything that Tanner said was spot on. But if I were to summarize it, I would say, in terms of being landlocked, we're not really landlocked, we're policy locked, right? And one other thing is that works in our favor is Articles 124 and 125 in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea requires that companies that are landlocked have access to tidewater. So that's an important consideration as well.
Correct.
And speaking of all of this business about being landlocked, remember that Japan and Germany came to us on bended knee wanting gas, liquefied natural gas. And what did the federal government, what did Trudeau say? There's no business case for it. It's ridiculous.
And speaking of being landlocked, there's a lot of countries like Switzerland that are very successful, so
Austria.
you don't have to
Yep.
worry about that. So our next speaker is Mitch Sylvester. He's the owner-operator of Sylvester Sporting Goods, a well-established store in Bonnyville since 1989. Mitch is actively involved in political advocacy. He chairs the Alberta First Pension Plan Initiative and is the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Mitch is an advocate for the people and speaks with honesty and integrity. Please welcome Mitch Sylvester.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see such a big group. Tanner alluded to the fact that we've done hundreds of town halls, or 100 town halls in the last year, and it's very nice to see all of you here. It's very nice of Mr. Carney to win an election for us. However, here's the problem. We're all in here. If we're going to go after this, we have to understand that if we don't win this, it's going to be very much harder on us, and there's no question in my mind that that's the plan. We have to understand that politicians are not going to save us, leaders are not going to save us. We have to save ourselves. And never has that been more true than right now. Pierre Poilievre, I, and everybody in this room thought that he was going to win that election,
Nope.
and that was going to make life a whole bunch easier for us. And again, it happens, he did not win that election, and life is not going to get easier. What we've got going on, Danielle Smith won the election. I had a lot to do with putting her as a premier. I did a lot of work for her. I did a lot of canvassing for her. I probably put as many people at the AGM last year as anybody, more than anybody actually. And Danielle's not saving us either. So here's the face of this project. The face of this project is you. And you have to accept the responsibility. Because if you don't accept the responsibility, we cannot do this. We have 300, 250,000 people. We're going to need 1.5 million votes to secure this win. How are we going to go from 250 to 1.5 million? I think we've got the easy 250 right now. So you're going to have to advocate to your friends and neighbors that this needs to happen and the reason it needs to happen. And there's no question in my mind that it needs to happen. So in order for us to win this, it's going to depend on you. We're going to run around the country expending a tremendous amount of effort on your behalf to try and rally people in rooms like this everywhere. We've got 40 events booked in the next 50 days. So we're going to be all the way from Lacrete, all the way down to the deep south of Alberta. We're going to be talking to town halls, small towns, rural communities, all manner of things like that. And that's going to be a tremendous amount of effort and a tremendous amount of time. And we're asking that you work as hard as we do. Because that's what it's going to take. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but that is what it's going to take. And when you're building an army, while we're talking about unpleasant things, we need donations, and we're going to pass the bucket around, and we thank you in advance for helping us out. All right, so we'll get down to this presentation. That's me. I'm the president of the UCPCA board in Bonnyville, Alberta, so I'm involved with government at the direct level. The reason for that is, I learned a long time ago when we were reading things like marches on the street against COVID lockdowns and all the rest of that kind of stuff, that we were talking to ourselves. And if you're not involved with government, you don't know what's going on and you have no influence. So we decided that it would be a much better deal to be at the UCPCA board level, and that's the group of people that I brought from Bonnyville to last year's AGM in Red Deer. Those people participate. We were 3 years in a row the largest group of people at the AGM, and that's what I'm asking you to do. That's what I asked them to do, and that's what I'm asking you guys right now is to help us out. Because again, we can't do it without you. I'll emphasize that many, many, many times. The other thing I want you to be sure of, and I'm sure of it, is every 4 years, even if we win a government, we have a conservative government, if we're lucky to have a conservative government, we're going to spend a whole bunch of time worrying about the next Liberal government undoing everything that's there. So I know that that's a concern of mine, and I'm sure it's a concern of everybody in this room. Now, when I was hosting the Premier last week or a week and a half ago, I asked her to elaborate on the damage that Ottawa is doing to Alberta. And she basically said it was an abusive relationship because I wanted her to say it, and I didn't want it to come from me. I just wanted her to make it very clear to the people in the room that we're being abused by Ottawa. Actually, if you look at the definition of oppression, we're being oppressed. That's how bad this is. But no other province in Canada is being oppressed like us. Right? And so that's the deal. So just understand what we have. We're the third largest oil producer in the world. We have the third largest oil reserve in the world. And we're $100 billion in debt. Have you seen the pictures of Trump in Qatar? Did you see him drive up that really long driveway and all the lit streets and all that? Did you see that? Where do we see that in Alberta? Where do we see that kind of exhibition of wealth here in Alberta? Well, we don't because it's all gone. They've been taking that wealth from us since 1905. All right, here's the path to the referendum. Dennis alluded to it. I just want you to see it again. So we got a collection of the digital pledge, the Vote Yes to Alberta Sovereignty. Then we register the petition with Elections Alberta, which is what we're doing right now. We're going to register our petition request with Elections Alberta right now, and as soon as the law actually changes for 177,000 signatures on our petition, we will have the first one in on that day and on that morning. Within 90 days, Elections Alberta verifies the signature collected from the public, so we have to go out there and collect 177,000 signatures. So we've broken the province up into 89 CAs, which is 87, but going to be 2 more, so that'll be 89. So we're going to be going to every constituency association and gathering signatures from all of our people so that we can make this work. We have to get the 177,000 signatures in order to have a referendum for independence. Okay? The government of Alberta will accept it, and then if we win it, the government has to implement it. So therefore, let's go back to my comment about how you have to be involved with government. So if I was a thinking person, and sometimes I am, I would think that would be a very good idea to become a member of the government that's going to be in power when that decision is made. Because we have to be able to influence that government with membership and with our voice. And governments do listen to people. The thing they hate the most is large crowds that are all thinking the same. Our Prime Minister said one of the most astonishing things I could ever imagine a Canadian Prime Minister saying. He said, there is no core identity in mainstream Canada. No mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state. So what's a post-national state? No borders, no identity, open to all manner of immigration. Does that sound like anything that's been going on here in the last 10, 12 years, 15 years? So he thinks that we do not have an identity, and that we are not actually a country. We're actually a place where all the citizens of the world can come here because we have wide open borders. So that's been happening both sides of the border here, and it's become a big problem. And this is when it all started. Dennis alluded to this from Mr. Clifton, and here's my point. My grandparents came here in that time. They came here, they left everything behind. They started brand new. They came to Alberta. They broke the land by hand. They pulled stumps by hand. They lived in a dirt floor shack until they could get a team of horses to help them pull the stumps and make things easier. But the thing of it was is that they believed in a dream. They believed that it would be better for them when they got here and when they got that done. So that's where we're at right now. We're starting way further ahead than them, but we have to stop thinking that this is not going to be easy. This is going to be very hard. This is going to be one of the biggest fights we'll ever do. But here's what we have to understand. There's a lot at stake for us, and things are not going to get better than they are now. They're just going to get worse. because they're telling us that. They're showing us that every day. So things are going to get worse. We have to make a decision that we're going to take this fight to them, and we can win this. We don't have to shoot anybody. There's a legal path. We just have to work hard to attain it. And if called upon, maybe we'd have to come to a demonstration at the legislature, but they are going to work tooth and nail against us, and I'll tell you why. Because understand this, if we win this referendum for independence, we make the rules all of a sudden. They will not be happy with the fact that we're making rules. We could ban political parties. We could have representation, equal representation, rural versus urban. We could do all manner of good things there. Like, we could change everything. Government corruption is the biggest problem with what's going on here. And I'm going to get into it quite a bit here, and we'll keep going. All right, so this is where the problem started in 1980. I remember that very clearly. I was around when they said that they didn't want the power base of the country to go from Ottawa to Calgary. That was what it was said. I remember it clearly. I said, oh my God, that's silly. What would it matter? We're all one country. Why would it be different if it was from Ottawa to Calgary? Well, for them, it was a big difference. And that's when the equalization payment scheme came in. That's that very point they decided that Alberta was to stay broke, or broker, than Ottawa. So that's the reason that all this nonsense started. And that's, I just went to that. Okay, so here's the next contribution. We alluded to that. Look at the graph, it's very clear. Alberta donates $244 billion. Quebec gets $327 billion. That's from 2007 to 22, it's worse. Here's the equalization payments. Notice how much Quebec gets, $13.6 billion. This is 25-26, and this is 24-25. Do you notice how they're very similar? Do you notice how much Alberta got?
Zero.
Do you notice how much Quebec got? $26 billion in 2 years. Do you know what the budget of the province of Alberta is? This year, it's bloated, it's bigger than ever. It's $75 billion. So that's 35% of our budget right there in 2 years given to Quebec. And they didn't earn anything, and they don't want our dirty oil. So just understand that. They're okay with not allowing us to earn while we're giving them money. And that's the key to the whole thing. Okay, let's talk about Canada pension. The one thing I know about a little bit is pension. I've done a lot of town halls on pension. So just understand this. There's a portability clause to your pension. So this portability clause means that no matter where you live in the world, they will send your pension. So, by extension, that means if you live in an independent country of Alberta, they have your pension. One of the things they're going to scare you with is they're going to say, well, we're going to cut the pension off. Well, that's actually, they can't do that. Because you've actually been paying pension, it belongs to you, and they owe it to you. So even if you live in Costa Rica, or in France, or anywhere like that, the portability clause kicks in, and they have to pay you. So another thing, let's understand how pension works in Alberta. It's a pay-as-you-go system, but right now, Albertans contribute $9 million a year to CPP. CPP pays Alberta seniors $6 billion a year. We have a $3 billion surplus every year. Now the CPP, when it was originally designed, it was designed so that any excess money that a province pays goes into a fund for that province, and it sits there, and the province can call it back at will if they want to leave CPP with interest. That number for Alberta right now is $325 billion, plus $3 billion, plus $3 billion for the last 2 years, because that number's 2 years old, plus interest on that money. So the government of Canada has actually put that in their asset pile, when in actual fact it's our asset. They owe us about $360 billion. That number alone is 60 years of pension without us earning another penny, putting another penny in as contribution, or collecting a penny of interest. There's 60 years of security there. The lowest number I've ever heard that they're going to give us is $195 billion That's the lowest number that they've said that they owe us. But they're not talking about what they owe us because they don't want to start the conversation. They've missed 4 deadlines since we've been doing this. They keep saying that we're going to give them money, we're going to give them money. But they never give us a number because they don't want us to start the discussion. All right, so this is important. They come in and they just expect us to forget what happened in the last 10 years. So we have to remember what happened in the last 10 years because it probably mirrored the next 10.
Could probably be worse.
Okay, the demand for oil is going up. They're talking about cutting our production down. This is the amount of money we lost, $500 billion. $500 billion is a lot of money, especially since we owe $100 billion. So that's what we've lost in investment. So what does that actually do? Like, what does that mean? That means that we've lost a lot of jobs, we've lost a lot of wealth, we've lost the ability to create more wealth, because I understand one thing, I've been in business for 45, 46 years. It's way easier to run a business with money than it is without money. I'm going to promise you that, because I know both sides. And I'm going to tell you something else. When you have money, you can make decisions and you can build your business. When they consciously take money away from you so you cannot build your business, then everything suffers. So what happens when you build your business? You hire more people, you take more chances, the economy grows. If you keep taking that money away from people, then the economy doesn't grow. So Gilbo pulls a pin on an $11 billion natural gas plant in Rupert, or Kitimat, whatever it was, and that would then alluded to the fact that we did not want to sell our natural gas to Germany and Japan, to the leading economies in the world. That cost us trillions of dollars in revenue. Trillions of dollars in revenue. And if you saw that picture of Trump lately, he was in Qatar and actually took that up for us. So it's not in our plan. So how do you think that that does not get into our plan? We burn off natural gas. We've got one of the highest levels of natural gas anywhere in the world. But we don't want to sell it to those people. Why is that? Because they want us to stay broke. That's the answer. There's no other answer. And if you're being abused by someone, anyone, do they like you?
Nope.
Do they care about you? How can they? If they're doing that to their own people, never in my life would I have thought that it's possible for our government to stifle our biggest industry. Can you understand that? Why would they do that? Because they don't want our people to be prosperous. It's a very simple answer. So if you're feeling guilty about the elbows up thing, we've been on Team Canada forever. Team Canada has not been on Team Alberta for the last 100 years.
That's right.
Not only that, you're trying to cap production with this carbon emission things. So what's going to happen if they cap production? They're literally, according to our premier, going to cut our production in half. Do you not understand what that means to the province of Alberta? That means the biggest recession we've ever seen. Like, even if they cut it 10-15%, that's amazing. Like, when Trudeau came into power in 2015, our area in Bonneville, we lost 1,000, 1,500 jobs. And I'm telling you what, real estate went in the toilet, people didn't have enough money to pay their bills, their houses went for sale. Just imagine if they cut the production in half. Not only are they milking the cow and taking all our money, they're killing the cow. So just understand what that means for our kids and for our future. Because this is what we're talking about here right now. There's a lot of people in this room that are retired and are my age. We probably okay until we die. But I'm looking at what's going on with the kids. I've got kids that can't afford to buy a house at 28 years old. And it wasn't that long ago, it seemed like not that long ago when I was in high school. And I'm going to tell you what, people were actually buying houses just on the way out of high school. Because I like to tell this story, because back then there was no birth control, and there was a lot of pregnant people in high school. As a consequence to that, they had to buy houses and they had to get on with it. And the funniest thing is, a lot of those people have been married ever since. Like, it turned out to be a real good thing for them. But what I'm saying is this, they could afford to buy a house. Today, if you got out of high school, you would not be able to afford to buy a house. All right, this is what they're doing. This is what else they're doing. They're blocking pipelines. They're tanker ban. In the west only, tankers can go up to St. Lawrence. There's no problem with that. But it can't go up to coastal Prince Rupert and northern BC. But they go from Alaska around into international water and down to the USA. But they can't pick up oil and gas in BC. Why is that? Because they don't want us to prosper. That's a conscious thing. And we can't ignore the fact that they literally hate us. I mean, I don't understand how else to put it. Bill C-293, any farmers in the room? All right, you guys know anything about C-293? Here's the deal. You gotta love this one. So they're going to create another emergency at some point because they're running all around the world trying to make sure that everybody's mandatory vaccines are happening. So this is what is going to be, say it's avian flu, because they just killed those 400 ostriches, and we're going to say that that's probably a precursor to what's going on. So they're going to create this emergency, and it's going to allow them to go to your farm and seize your land and your herd. Well, good luck, though. What are you going to do about it? You're going to start shooting. But that's what they're putting into law. Why would they be putting that into law at all, anyways? Like, I was just driving here, and I noticed granaries in every yard, so the land here must be absolutely exceptional. And I didn't know that till today, till I was doing the drive. So I'm thinking there's got to be some excellent land and some very well-off farmers by the looks of what I'm seeing on the way up here. But the whole thing is this. What's the point of that law? Control the food, control the people. Is that okay? So but now you know. Right now we know this stuff is happening. And like I said, that's what I'm saying. It's not going to get better. $11.9 gigatons of CO2 from all the things we've done and the billions of dollars we spent. China emits 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every 37 hours. So all of the green policies, all of the stop pipelines, all of everything, China produces that amount in less than 2 days. Why are we doing that? I know why we're doing it. The point of this whole discussion. You can't tax people into poverty. It's not going to change the weather. Here's the other thing that they're doing. Understand this. This is conscious as well. Here's a list of the taxes that we pay. Carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate tax, goods and services tax, taxes, excise tax, fuel tax, alcohol tax, tobacco tax, cannabis tax, excise duties on other stuff, customs duties, tariffs, air travelers tax, luxury tax, provincial territorial tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, business tax, estate tax, and now they want to tax your house a good state.
Yikes.
Is that a little excessive?
It's a lot of taxes.
Is that a little excessive? Yeah. Why are they doing that? Because they want to make you poorer. Again, it's the same answer for everything that they're doing. So understand this. There's got to be a certain level that they're going to try and put on you for trying to leave the country. However, they don't have to do this to us. Any of it. This is all brought on us from them. We never asked for any of it. Even as little as 6 or 8 weeks ago, I would have thought, you know what? I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be talking to you about this. Well, when Carney won the election, I thought, you know what? That's just about enough. We were onboarding 4,000 people an hour after Colin Carney won the election. We had people, a lot of people in Alberta fed up with this. You notice the separation, talks of independence is now coffee shop talk?
It's everywhere.
Would you have thought that a year ago?
Nope.
Would you have thought that all the people out there that used to be on the other side of the fence that never even dreamed that this was a possibility are now seeing the fact that we cannot change this? Here's the other problem. This is all about money. So, what happens to some of the money? Well, out of $187 billion worth of infrastructure spending, there's 20,000 missing projects. They printed $352 billion during COVID with no audit. That doesn't include WE scandal for $1 billion. What else do we have? The ArriveCan, $60,000 app that they spend $1 billion on. Where's that money going? All over the place. Okay, here's the other thing. They broke Parliament. Why did they broke Parliament? Because they had $400 million missing in the Green Slush Fund, and they didn't want to have to answer the questions.
And it's still prorogued.
That's really why they broke Parliament. That is actually the reason. The other thing that they didn't want to talk about was foreign interference during elections. That is happening. We haven't had Parliament in 152 days. They also approved $40 billion in extra spending, going to be up to $70 billion without anybody discussing it. Is that democracy? They think that they can absolutely do this. So my question to you, and this is what's been bothering me all along here, is how come they're never held accountable? We didn't elect kings. This is the biggest part of our problem. We live in a lawless society. Whether you like it or not, they're showing us that by everything they're doing, and there's no consequences. When's the last time a government official or MLA or MP went to jail? 1923. So I want to ask you a question. Do you remember when that orange juice scandal happened, when Stephen Harper was in power, and the lady bought like a $25 glass of orange juice, and it just about brought the government down? Like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about billions of dollars, and they're not answering any questions. You remember Prime Minister Trudeau saying, yeah, he never answered the question in 10 years. How's that work? So, the moral of the story is this. We're living in a very corrupt system. Government is above the law. Like it or not, our democracy is in big trouble. It is our duty to take care of ourselves now. And that's where we're at. Retaliatory tariffs, another foreign thing. So we tariff an electric car, an electric Chinese car, 100% that nobody's ever heard of or seen. And then our federal government turns around and does that and allows China to tariff our peas and our canola 100%. That's 50% of the crop in Montreal. I don't know what the ratio is here, but that's 50% of it. How's that work? So who's our government working for? Definitely not our farmers.
Yep.
All right. In the past hours, both C-63 Online Time Act and BC-11 Online Streaming Act have been brought to the forefront. Those are both censorship bills. In my lifetime, I would have never thought that I would have to worry about censorship in Canada. Here's the thing about that. You don't know what you don't know. You don't even know you're being censored. If they don't allow it through and the information never comes to you, how are you going to know? All right, Alberta produces the largest ever fentanyl lab case in 16 years, 7,600 kilograms of chemical to make fentanyl. This is in Bellevue. They caught this in this lab.
Another super lab.
7,600 kilograms of material. It's not illegal here in Canada to import the material that makes fentanyl.
Yikes.
More American kids died last year than died in the last 75 years of the American military history, including Korea, including Vietnam. 110,000 American kids died of opioid overdoses last year, and they lost $103,000 in the last 75 years with the military and the wars. We're losing 22 kids a day here in Alberta. And I'm in Canada, sorry, no, in Canada. Could you imagine if gun people shot 22 people a day? Like if there was 22 murders a day with guns? Dennis alluded to this. Mr. Carney's a socialist. I won't read it to you. Dennis alluded to it. Mr. Carney's a socialist. Understand that's what we're fighting. They want our money. They're taking it. We have to decide that we want to give it to them or if we want to keep it for ourselves. That's the decision. It's that simple. If we're going to allow this to go on, we can. This will be our choice. This is going to be the most important decision probably any of you in this room ever make politically, no doubt in my mind.
Easily.
So you're going to have to decide today, before you leave, that you're either going to fight this or you're going to let them get their way. That's the only two choices. I don't see any other choices. One last comment on Mr. Carney. He dropped his tariffs before he did the elbows up program. So he did not, he lied to you. He lied to you through the whole election. Last thing, let's talk about socialism and let's talk about guns. Let us allude to the fact that we're actually working on changing the gun bill in Alberta. We're actually trying to get a gun license for Albertans. We started this on Sunday. As a matter of fact, we reached out to the government today. They're pretty happy with it. They think that this could happen.
Nice.
So if that's the case, we're going to go back to gun laws in Alberta to what we had in Alberta in 2014 before the Liberals came into power. So that'll be a really good
Nice. Nice. Alberta going less for
This is the
Albertans.
communist version of what gun control should be. All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns, that way no guns can ever be used to command the party. And here's the way the Americans look at it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Hell yeah.
And you can read that for yourself. All right, there are a lot of 2 million immigrants into Canada every year. That's not a problem. My parents or grandparents are immigrants. 2 million is a problem. We can't sustain it in Edmonton into the country every single year. The infrastructure just does not handle it. Our healthcare is being stretched, housing prices are crazy, and it's all because of that. Tanner talked about leverage. Here's the deal, I believe this with all my heart. If you really want to change, let them to leave and mean it.
Yep. Be ready to
You
leave.
can't make a threat if you don't mean it. I don't understand what the Premier was saying when she said, oh, it's going to affect national unity, and then right away later said, we're going to give them 6 more months. That's fine, she can have her 6 months, and I agree. If they changed all these things, and I asked her this question directly in public, I said, so how many of your demands are they going to have to come up with? All of them, or are you going to give them a little bit of grace and say, if they come up with half? I would suggest that they have to give them all. And here's the way I feel about this. And this is a democracy, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to live with the results. So if you don't feel you've suffered long enough to switch, you're going to suffer more. If you have not suffered enough, you have God-given right to suffer more. And finally, I think that Mr. Carney will finish the job. Thank you very much.
Yep. That's his goal anyway, is to finish the job.
How would an onboard you? Okay, so if you know how to scan the QR code, it'll take you directly.
All right, everyone, go to
website,
albertaprosperityproject.com.
We're going to take everybody that's signed up in the back, and we're going to send you a shareable text within the next 2 or 3 days, and we're going to ask you to share that text with all the people that you know that would help and join us. That's going to make life quite a bit easier for you. So if you can do that, that would be super. The other thing you can do is, if you don't believe that that's something that you want to do and you want to talk to them personally, get a form in the back, put 10 names on it, 12 names on it. There's a return address on them. You can send them to us in the mail, and then we're going to put those people into our system, and then we will contact them. So we've onboarded 170,000 people here in the last 3 weeks. So it was quite a large volume for us to handle. We actually have 15 to 18,000 volunteers that we're also going to try and put to work. So if we're going to win this, we have to do that. You have to get people. This is what it's all about. We're going to need money, and we're going to need people. So to get this over the top, that's what it's going to take. And then I really believe the fight is going to start. They're not going to let what could possibly be the largest economy in the world just go away without a fight.
Nope.
So it's going to have to require a big majority, and in order for us to get a big majority, we're going to have to do the work. Thank you very much.
Anybody from Alberta, go to albertaprosperityproject.com and sign up.
Is there an email address? Canada Post is supposed to be going on strike. Okay.
They're always on strike.
So it's albertaprosperityproject.com that you can send any forms or any registrations to as well, just because we're going to have a strike soon, I think. So, we are going to have a Q&A. Before we go to the Q&A, though, I would like to personally thank all the volunteers. Our great commodity is the volunteers who have organized and helped with this evening's event. Our volunteers are vital to our success, and we sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Now we're going to do a quick Q&A. So if people, did you have something, Carmen? Yeah, so I'm going to ask everybody to maybe line up along here, and I will hold the mic for you. And the speakers, if they could come to the front to answer the questions, so everybody can hear the answers, that would be
They're
great.
going to do a live Q&A now.
So if you would like to line up here, if you have a question and you'd like to ask any of the speakers, just address your question to the speaker.
My name's Kent. I'm just give a little background of who I am. I'm Kent I own Bob's Bistro in town here. I've lived in Alberta for about 25 years. I've lived in 5 provinces and worked in them, so been around a little bit. I just wanted to thank you for coming out. I got 2 questions. One is, for a Maple Leaf fan there, what's the difference between a Toronto Maple Leafs and a mosquito? A mosquito stops sucking. I got one unfortunately. Okay, just reinforce what some of you have said.
I want to ask a question. It's all good. I'll go to the line and ask a question.
The Romans, God gave the Romans the pride minds, and there's a pride. One of the things I just came up with recently on an email or text from somebody was that they have MPs in Ottawa on the MAID program have approved and recommended that you can do assisted suicide to children with parents not having any involvement. So that's how deprived Ottawa has got. And we need to get out of that relationship. I can jump into a lot of things here. And the other thing, parliamentary, the Senate, even if Poilievre got in with majority, the Senate is 90% liberal. They would install. So a lot of the stuff just keeps going on and on. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, which leads to this historical perspective, is the Alamo. Okay, most people don't realize that the Alamo was under Mexican control, and people in Texas were being abused by the Mexican government. And in 1845, Texas became a state of the United States, thanks to the Americans that came down there to help them get out of that predicament, which we're in a predicament now. And you got to remember that the predicament that we're in historically will lead to the deprived people will do everything, including violence, to keep us in Canada. And the question is, we're preaching to the converted here. We need to change Edmonton, Calgary, and Lethbridge. What are you doing to get those people?
There we go.
Okay, well, we're going to spend money to talk to the kids. We're going to move to where they are, TikTok, all manner of social media. The other thing is, Edmonton's polling at 39% right now in favor of independence.
Hell yeah. Already at 39%.
If Edmonton's polling at 39%, then rural is probably, in my mind, around 80%. This is a very winnable fight, and Calgary's going to be better.
Just a comment on the issue of bloodshed. In the 1995 Quebec secession referendum, Mr. Parizeau, who was the premier at the time, had a discussion with the military, and that the military would stand down if Quebec's referendum on secession was successful. By the same token, the same sort of discussion can occur here. But one thing that we know is that if we have a successful referendum on secession here, it really is very unlikely that there is going to be a military incursion into Alberta. What could happen, though, is the kind of thing that we see Antifa does, and that is to create violence and cause some harm.
That could happen.
Can we just keep it to one question each, so we can take all evening?
So they've lowered the threshold to 177,000. Do you think this is a ruse to expedite the referendum? Because a quick referendum will be a failed referendum. Do you believe that patience is our biggest virtue right now? I know I was reading you, I follow you on X pretty hard. I mentioned last time you were here in Mundare, we had a good chat. But like, I believe that the government, and this is something we can all take to the bank, if we win it, they're all out of a job. So not one of them is working for us at this point, okay? Is patience a virtue? Can we control how long it takes to supply that, the petition?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's important to address it, and here's the way I would address it, is that we see certain things that happen that are accelerating the growth of the sovereignty movement. A very successful petition, for example, which could be achieved by the end of September, will be another momentum builder. The referendum itself will be a few months after that. And again, we're building and we're building and building. And so even though what we see now is 45% in the latest poll in support of Alberta sovereignty, and like I said, 65% of UCP members favor sovereignty, you have to understand the mindset of people who are being polled. If it's a very controversial question, given that we still live in this era of cancel culture, many people will not respond to the question or will respond with a safe answer. And we know that because we saw this happen in the U.S. The polls didn't really predict at all that Trump and the Republicans would win in a landslide in all of the swing states. So I think it's important to recognize that also here in Canada, and I mentioned this, in the trucker convoy, people's accounts were frozen if they had contributed to it. So this issue of cancel culture is a real thing. So what is the reality of the percentage of people in Alberta, voting people in Alberta? It'll be about 2.8 to 3 million who will be eligible voters. What is the reality in terms of the appetite for these people to vote for sovereignty? Well, you can look at polls, but I'd like you to consider that polls may not be all that accurate. And as a proxy, consider the referendum, which I mentioned, when 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization in 2021. Is that a proxy for Alberta sovereignty? I don't know. the answer. And it's the same thing with what I said about the pension plan. Going from, less than 50% to more than 55%, thanks to these two gentlemen here. So we may well be closer than people think. And, I guess you could say one thought is, let's strike while the fire is hot. The other thing is to delay too long as well. And so we're doing our best to navigate the timing. But I think we're going to be forced into the petition very soon, that it'll be up to the government to determine the timing of the referendum. And whatever that timing is, we have to absolutely be out in full force to get the number of people on the referendum. And I'm thinking it's going to be something north of 1.5 million that we're going to need to win this.
So my worry is this, on that campaign, they had somebody put the motion in, and then they weren't allowed to do the motion again for 5 years. So Thomas McCasick has put a motion in right now that's ahead of ours. His threshold is 600,000. If that fails, according to the rules, and I don't know if the rules have changed or not changed, then we wouldn't be able to pursue independence for 5 years from now. So that's why we have to be on top of it, and we have to hurry, because I still think we can win it. Because there's a 30-day advertising period, 120-day signature collection period, and then that's going to have to, the people is going to call when the referendum is. So we're probably 8 to 10 months away from the referendum, no matter what. We can do it in 10 months.
Thank you. I'll admit right up front, I'm a recovering bureaucrat. Unfortunately, the two most distasteful years of my life, I held a senior bureaucratic position with the federal government. I state that because I have a thought behind that that goes to my question. In 1967, I was in Toronto and I witnessed Phil Guilbeault stand there and state when he was advertising Man in His World for Montreal that Quebec was so good, it never ratified Confederation, and that is why Canada had to keep paying it to get it in. Well, in my position, I was a lead auditor. I was a contract corporate auditor, not a personal tax auditor. I wanted to audit a company in Quebec. And a ministerial level individual told me I wasn't permitted to, as they had never signed in the Confederation and we did not have jurisdiction. If this is indeed correct, which you folks have the resources to verify, a lot of what we're talking about is moot.
Yeah, and added to that, the 1982 Constitution Act, Quebec also did not sign on to that as well.
Right, we get that. We understand that. The problem is to get a judge to rule on that when every judge in the country is going to put it.
That's a very
Yeah,
interesting
that's a good point. And that
angle
actually
there.
brings up the issue of the Westminster statute. So which fundamentally states that we're already a sovereign nation. For many people have tried to advance that, but as Mitch says, no court is going to support that position right now. Doug Forrest and his team put out a great video on this discussion called "The Myth of Canada and the Illusion of Canada" as a more recent update. But here's the key point: is that if we have the successful referendum, which we will, then, as I said earlier, but just to remind everybody, international law recognizes the will of the people expressed in a referendum. And then to validate that, other countries need to acknowledge their sovereignty, and the U.S. will do it the very next day after a successful referendum.
Thank you.
Jane just answered my question, but what I want to know is, we have a successful referendum, and the federal government just ignored it, just like they did when we had the referendum on equalization. What do we do? What are next steps here?
That's a good question.
That's another great question. Well, on the day of a successful referendum, acknowledged by the U.S., that the U.S. administration, probably the President or Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, calls Danielle Smith and says, congratulations, you are now a sovereign nation. At which point Danielle Smith should be able to say that we now will unilaterally declare our sovereignty. And why this is really important to understand is because it follows international law. And the most recent example of that was in February 2008 when Kosovo had a successful referendum on sovereignty and unilaterally declared its independence. And can you guess which two countries were the first to acknowledge Kosovo's sovereignty? Japan and Canada. All right? So precedent has been set. On that day, by the way, the provincial government, now an Alberta sovereign government, will inform all businesses and the public that no longer will any tax dollars be sent to Ottawa. So that's an important point as well. We've drafted an interim constitution already that will guide the transition process from a province to a sovereign nation. We're just vetting the final components of it right now, but it's actually brilliantly crafted. And it would serve the basis for, in that transition period, to organize a full constitutional conference in which, following the completion of that conference and the drafting of a full constitution, which would be an extension of the interim constitution, then the public will have an opportunity to vote on which form of government it would like. So that is a plan. And we've dealt with a lot of the other issues as well. And so this is, for me, one of the favorite, and I think for my two partners here, one of our most favorite time in these town halls is dealing with the questions. But just to point out, there are about 71 questions on the website that have been answered in the FAQ section. And Tanner and I have a little bit of a responsibility. We need to update some of the answers.
All right, I'm up
My
next.
name's Martin. My family's been in the County since 1896. In the early to mid-60s, Canada had a prime minister by the name of Lester B. Pearson. At that time in our school system, we were taught that for Canada to exist in the future, we had to divide Canada into west and east. At the Ontario-Manitoba border, the west needed Thunder Bay for the ship and access to the St. Lawrence. When Trudeau came in, I don't know whatever happened to that part of our education system. But my question is, why has nobody revisited this?
I think you bring up a legitimate point. I think the gentleman's quite correct. The culture in the East is different than the culture in the West. That's just a fact of Canada. And we also know the scriptures that says a house divided cannot stand. So if we, in this country, continue to try and force something to work, which clearly isn't working, it will cause the entire apparatus to crumble and fall. Michael Wagner has a marvelous book just on this, on the culture of the West, and more specifically on Alberta, and why it differs from the rest of the country. Now, you talked about the need to get to St. Lawrence and to the coast. Now, this was back in the 60s. The geography of our shipping and our trade has changed a little bit, right? We ship, as I mentioned at the start of my speech, a lot of product to America. Out of Alberta's exports, some $180 billion worth of export every year, 90% goes south. It doesn't go up north, it doesn't go to the coast and across the world, no. It goes south to America, and a majority of our imports in Alberta, about 67% of them, also come from America. More than that, our major export is oil and gas. 75% of our exports are constituted by oil and gas. And those go, again, not to the coast, but for the most part, they head down south. So I would say the shipping geography has changed a little bit. Like, of course, we want to diversify. And we want to enter into as many markets as possible so as to increase our economic benefits and well-being, absolutely. But I think we ought also, in this age, to try and strengthen our trading relationship with the Americans as much as possible, especially in light of the uncertainty that is coming from Ottawa and from the government there right now. Very good point.
If you had Manitoba West, we're not relying on oil and gas. We got agriculture, we got cattle, we got lumber, we got mining, we have everything. Once you split that border. And the reason we were taught that is that the West would survive on resources, Ontario and Quebec would survive on their minerals. Because there is a lot of minerals that are not being mined in Ontario and Quebec. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for what you do. I know that you guys are mostly volunteers, and I appreciate what the Alberta Prosperity Project is doing. So my question is a two-part question. First of all, I'd like you to expand on international recognition. So I know that the Alberta Prosperity Project had a a group of people that went down to Washington, D.C. Was there any indication from D.C. or anyone in there saying that they're willing to immediately recognize Alberta as an independent country? And then the second part, are we pushing for a referendum this year, 2025, or are we waiting on 2026 as the government of Alberta has established?
Well, as much as, and Mitch can add on to this as well, as much as we'd like to have the referendum actually take place in, say, by November, the reality is the timing probably isn't going to work for that. And the Premier has already said that very likely it would be in 2006. The other part of the question is, where is the U.S. administration on this? So I happen to be one of the two people that went. As part of the first delegation to go. And the preliminary comments were, and I touched on this, is that we're very much in favor of Alberta sovereignty. We recognize that joining the U.S. is not in the cards at this particular time. And yes, there was discussion about recognition. There were two points of politics, because we were looking for political and economic support, and the political support was number one, and this was a question posed to us. Would it be helpful if the Secretary of State or the President commented on Alberta sovereignty? And the answer to that was yes, as long as it focused on the benefits to Alberta and how how the U.S. could help facilitate the transition. And the second part of it was the acknowledgement of Alberta sovereignty consequent to a successful referendum. So that would be the answer to your question. Did you want to comment?
My name is Dennis. I'm a father of four adult children, all with 6 spouses. I have 8 grandkids, and that's the reason I'm here today. In 2020,
I just hear email from your wife.